When the HOA erected a steel fence across the only road to his ranch, he didn't just lose access to his land, he gained an opportunity. With a bold move, he transformed their gate into a toll road, turning their attempt to control him into a profitable defiance that would leave the neighborhood stunned. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter from the HOA. It was official, stamped with their logo, and written in that cold, bureaucratic tone that made his blood simmer. The notice informed him that the access road to his ranch, the one he'd driven for 20 years, was now deemed community property. A fence would be installed within the week, complete with a locked gate, to protect the aesthetic and safety of the neighborhood. He read it twice, then crumpled it in his fist. The ranch, his 200-acre slice of freedom, was his life's work. Cattle grazed there, crops grew there, and his family's history was etched into every fence post. Now, some pencil-pushing HOA board thought they could cut him off with a chain-link barrier? He wasn't about to let that stand. The ranch sat just outside the city limits, a sprawling piece of land that had been in his family for 3 generations. He'd inherited it from his father, who'd inherited it from his grandfather. It wasn't just property, it was a legacy. The access road, a narrow strip of gravel, ran through the edge of a new subdivision that had sprouted up 5 years ago. The neighborhood, with its cookie-cutter houses and manicured lawns, was governed by an HOA that seemed to revel in control. At first, he'd ignored their petty rules. Nobody was going to tell him how to run his ranch. But when the subdivision expanded, the HOA started eyeing the access road. They claimed it was part of their jurisdiction, even though his deed clearly showed it as his private right-of-way. He'd argued with them at meetings, shown them the surveys, but they brushed him off. Now, they'd made their move. The fence went up on a Tuesday. He watched from his truck as contractors hammered posts into the ground and strung chain link across the road. A heavy gate, padlocked and gleaming, blocked the only way to his ranch. He could still see his land in the distance, his barn, his fields, but getting there now meant a 3-mile detour down a county road, assuming he could even cross the creek that often flooded. The HOA had effectively stranded him. He drove to their office that afternoon, his jaw tight, and demanded to speak to the board president, a man named Harold Grayson. Harold, with his pressed khakis and smug smile, leaned back in his chair and said, "The fence is for the community's benefit. You'll need to apply for a gate key, and we'll review your request." The condescension in his voice was palpable. He left the office fuming, knowing the review would drag on for months, if it ever happened at all. That night, he couldn't sleep. He paced the porch, the stars above his only company, and thought about his options. He could sue, but lawyers were expensive, and courts were slow. He could try negotiating, but the HOA had already shown they didn't care about his rights. Or he could fight fire with fire. By morning, an idea had taken root, one so audacious it made him grin for the first time in days. If the HOA wanted to play games with his road, he'd turn their game into his business. He wasn't just going to get through that gate, he was going to make them pay for it. He started with research. He pulled out his deed, the surveys, and every legal document tied to the ranch. The access road was undeniably his, a private easement granted decades ago when the land was subdivided. The HOA's claim was flimsy, built on their own bylaws rather than any real authority. He called his cousin, a lawyer in the next county, who confirmed what he suspected: the HOA had overstepped. The fence was on his property, and he had every right to control access. But instead of tearing it down, he decided to use it. The gate was already there, sturdy and functional. All it needed was a new purpose. He spent the next day at the county clerk's office, filing paperwork to register the access road as a private toll road. It was an obscure process, but legal under state law. Private toll roads weren't common, but they existed, mostly for rural landowners who controlled key routes. He submitted maps, paid the fees, and got the necessary permits. The clerk raised an eyebrow but processed everything without question. By the end of the week, he had official approval. The road was his, and he could charge for its use. Next, he got to work on the gate. He hired a local welder to modify it, adding a ticket booth and a mechanical arm like the ones at parking garages. He installed a sign, "Private Toll Road, $5 per vehicle, cash only." He bought a cheap security camera to record transactions and deter vandalism. The setup wasn't fancy, but it was functional. He didn't need it to look pretty, just to make a point. On Saturday morning, he opened for business. The first customers were his neighbors, the same HOA members who'd supported the fence. They pulled up in their SUVs, expecting to breeze through with their gate keys, only to find him sitting in the booth, a ledger in hand. $5, he said, his voice calm but firm. The driver of the first car, a woman in yoga pants, sputtered. "This is outrageous. We have a right to use this road." He pointed to the sign and the permit taped to the booth window. "This is my property, and this is a toll road now. Pay or turn around." She huffed but handed over a $5 bill. The next car did the same. By noon, he'd collected $60. Word spread fast. By Monday, the HOA board was in a frenzy. Harold Grayson called him, his voice dripping with indignation. "You can't charge people to use a community road," he barked. "It's not a community road," he replied. "It's mine. Check the deed." Harold threatened legal action, but he just laughed. "Go ahead. I've got the paperwork." He knew the HOA's lawyers would find the same thing his cousin had. The toll road was legal, and the fence was on his land. They could fight him, but it would cost them. The toll road became a daily routine. He manned the booth himself, though he hired a local kid to cover afternoons. Most drivers paid without complaint, grumbling but unwilling to take the long detour. Some tried to argue, but he stayed firm, pointing to the sign and the camera. A few even apologized, admitting they hadn't realized the HOA's fence would backfire. He just nodded and took their money. By the end of the first month, he'd cleared $2,000, enough to cover the setup costs and then some. The HOA didn't give up easily. They sent letters demanding he cease operations, claiming the toll road violated their bylaws. He ignored them. They tried to organize a boycott, urging residents to use the county road instead, but the creek flooded after a rain, making the detour impassable. Drivers kept coming, and the tolls kept rolling in. He started keeping a tally, not just of the money but of the looks on their faces, frustration, resignation, and sometimes a grudging respect. One day, a man in a suit showed up, introducing himself as the HOA's attorney. He offered a deal, remove the toll booth, and they'd grant him a gate key. He leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "I'm not here to negotiate. This is my road, and I'm running it my way." The attorney left empty-handed. That night, he celebrated with a beer on the porch, feeling a satisfaction he hadn't known in years. The toll road wasn't just about money. It was about control, about taking back what was his. Every $5 bill was a reminder that he'd outsmarted the HOA, turned their own weapon against them. But it also changed the dynamic in the neighborhood. Some residents started questioning the HOA's authority, showing up to board meetings to demand transparency. A few even thanked him, saying the toll road had opened their eyes to the board's overreach. He didn't care much for their gratitude. He wasn't in it to make friends, but it felt good to know he'd shaken things up. Months passed, and the toll road became a fixture. He upgraded the booth, adding a card reader for convenience. He hired a second kid to handle weekends, giving himself time to focus on the ranch. The profits weren't life-changing, but they paid for new fencing, a tractor repair, and a college fund for his nephew. More importantly, he had access to his land again, on his terms. The HOA still grumbled, but their threats grew weaker. They'd misjudged him, thinking he'd cave under pressure. Instead, he'd turned their gate into his empire. One morning, about a year after the fence went up, Harold Grayson pulled up to the booth. He looked tired, his khakis wrinkled. "We want to settle this," he said. They offered to remove the fence and recognize his easement if he'd shut down the toll road. He considered it for a moment, then shook his head. "I'm good," he said. "This road's mine, and it's staying open for business." Harold drove off without paying, the gate arm swinging shut behind him. He still runs the toll road today. The fence is still there, a reminder of the HOA's mistake. The booth is a little weathered now, but it stands strong, just like him. He doesn't know how long he'll keep it up, maybe until the HOA folds, maybe until he's ready to retire. For now, though, he's content. Every car that passes through is a victory, every toll a testament to his refusal to be pushed around. He took their gate and made it his own, and in doing so, he reclaimed not just his road, but his freedom. The story of his toll road spread beyond the county, catching the attention of local news outlets. A reporter came out to interview him, standing by the booth as cars rolled through. "What made you do it?" she asked. He looked at the gate, then back at her. "They thought they could lock me out of my own life," he said. "I just found a way to unlock it." The article ran with a photo of him leaning against the booth, the sign bold in the background. People started calling him a hero, a rebel, a legend. He didn't care for the labels. He was just a rancher who'd had enough. The toll road wasn't perfect. There were days when the camera failed or the gate stuck, and he had to deal with the occasional hothead who thought they could intimidate him. But those were small prices to pay. The ranch was thriving again, his cattle fetching good prices at market. He'd even started a small side hustle, selling beef directly to toll road customers who asked about the ranch. Life wasn't easy, but it was his, and that was enough. Looking back, he doesn't regret a thing. The HOA thought they'd won when they built that fence, but they'd underestimated him. He turned their barrier into his opportunity, their gate into his triumph. And every time he hears the clink of coins in the booth, he's reminded that no one, not an HOA, not a board president, not a fence, can take away what's his.